we're joined by our Senior Advisor for Foreign Policy and National Security, Rick Grenell. And Rick, there's a lot to talk about at home and abroad. You've got a new piece up at ACLJ.org, so we'll start at home. And all these issues get interconnected, too, with what's happening overseas. But a new piece up at ACLJ.org. California has the highest gas prices in the nation, and the state is totally governed by the left. We have a ton of listeners and supporters in California who are listening to this broadcast and watching this broadcast right now, Rick. Tell them what they will learn about in your piece, but also what could be done to alleviate some of the burden on these California drivers. I mean, and drivers across the country as well. We're all paying more.
Well, I'd say the first thing that they're going to learn is that the entire state of California is controlled by the left and has gripped us into not supplying enough energy. We don't participate in the explosion of liquid natural gas that the United States is able to participate in. We're not drilling. We've got a problem throughout California in that our beaches become filled with little oil pots because the reserves just off the beach are exploding and we're not tapping into them. This is, Mother Nature trying to tell us that the oil needs to be pumped. And yet we don't do it because the radical environmentalists have taken over California. But what Gavin Newsom is now doing is he's going to bribe everybody with a $400 check to say, well, we're going to continue gripping the supply. We're going to continue having this problem. But in order to appease you because you're all screaming about the high price, we're going to send you a $400 check right while I'm running for re-election. Now, shame on us for falling for all of this. I say take the money, deposit the check into your bank account, and keep screaming about more supply.
Rick, part of this is, and of course, you had the president saying yesterday, prepare for food shortages. I mean, we're in 2022. Prepare for food shortages. We have agricultural products in the United States are extensive. We have the ability to create and to grow and to manufacture. Prepare for food shortages?
Look, as all of the listeners that are hearing our voices today know, if you live in California, we have been being told for years now, and again, the state is totally controlled by the left in Sacramento, supermajority of the left. Republicans have no voice. We have been told for years, Jay, to take quick showers and to not water our grass because we have to conserve water even though we live on the ocean. We've been told to shut our appliances off between 5 and 9 p.m. This is what's happening in the state of California. We are being told to conserve less water, and yet we're not dealing with the supply issue, the very real supply issue of water. And the same with electricity. We could get more energy. We could get more food if we would fix the problems of the bad policies that Joe Biden is putting forward.
I encourage people to check this piece out at ACLJ.org. California has the highest gas prices in the nation. The state is totally governed by the left. And it's also a warning to other folks in different states. I mean, again, there's states that I'm starting to see that there's states and cities trying to give relief. But again, a lot of this is, like Rick said, for politics and can also lead to more inflation of gas prices, especially some of these federal plans that we have been talking about as well. I want to get into, Rick, the language being used on the White House, specifically on sanctions. I want to play it for you. Here's the President Biden saying, sanctions, there's nothing about deterrence there. Take a listen.
Sir, deterrence didn't work. What makes you think Vladimir Putin will alter course based on the action you've taken today?
Let's get something straight. You remember, if you covered me from the very beginning, I did not say that, in fact, the sanctions would deter him. Sanctions never deter. You keep talking about that. Sanctions never deter. The maintenance of sanctions, the increasing the pain, and the demonstration why I asked for this NATO meeting today is to be sure that after a month we will sustain what we're doing, not just next month, the following month, but for the remainder of this entire year. That's what will stop him.
But Rick, as we played for our audience, the Vice President of the United States, the Secretary of State of the United States, the Deputy National Security Advisor of the United States, the spokesperson for the Pentagon, the spokesperson for the White House, all said that the purpose of the sanctions, at least one of the purposes of the sanctions, just to be clear for everybody, was a deterrence and is deterrence. And yet the president, again, comes out and says, no, it's not, and sends this message to the world. You spent 10 years at the United Nations before you were an ambassador, before you were the acting DNI. You spent 10 years at the United Nations, specifically focused on making sure our messaging was correct. When the U.S. spoke, that it was clear. What kind of problems come from an unclear message when you're speaking to the world like the president was yesterday, being in Brussels and all these different summits?
Well, first of all, I can't emphasize enough that only in Washington, D.C., in the press newsrooms, are people pretending like what Joe Biden said is okay. The rest of us know that he's been contradicted by his own team. He's been contradicted by the facts that Donald Trump deterred Putin with his sanctions, the Russian pipeline sanctions. I keep saying this over and over, and I feel like nobody is listening to this. But Donald Trump had sanctions on the Russian pipeline. We didn't see an invasion from Putin. Joe Biden dropped those sanctions. The Senate Democrats voted to drop those sanctions. And they said they were dropping the sanctions because they didn't want to somehow embolden Putin. They were flat wrong. Deterrence works. We know that. And lastly, let me just say, shame on the media for allowing this guy, the president of the United States, to say things like deterrence doesn't work. Why didn't this reporter push back and say, wait a minute, even your own team is saying deterrence works, and Donald Trump proved that deterrence works, but he doesn't get pushback. So he's going to continue pretending like people buy this. The only people that buy this are the Washington, D.C. types and those in the newsrooms.
Rick, there's also talk again, and including Republicans saying, you know what, we need to get those MiGs over to Ukraine. It's complicated, I know, because of the geopolitical aspect of it. What's your thoughts?
Look, I think we should be giving the Ukrainians the latest weaponry. Why can't they buy from us the latest hardware that we have? I don't understand why, selling them the javelins or somehow, means that we're escalating if we give them a plane that works. The MiGs, they're prone to maintenance problems,
Yep.
and then we're going to have to fix them. I just think that give them the latest and the greatest and, sell them what America has to offer.
Let me ask you this. It's been a month that this horrible conflict's been going on. The death and destruction has been unbelievable. When we talked about this about 2 weeks ago, Rick, I remember this. We were talking about the fact that there have been 2.5 million people displaced. Now we're looking at over 10 million people displaced. What is the end here? What's the exit ramp, if any, here?
Well, first of all, I don't want to sound callous because it's terrible when you see this. Every heart breaks and you emotionally want to do something. But I think as public policy leaders, we have to remember that there's heartache and humanitarian crises all around the world. I was just tweeting today about 4 of the 12 UN peacekeeping operations. Each one of these 4 that I'm going to name are literally more than $1 billion a year. That's South Sudan, Mali, the Congo, and Central African Republic. 4 UN peacekeeping operations out of the 12 that we have. America pays 25% of that. My point is there is death and destruction and humanitarian crisis all around the world. If our media descended into Africa on just one of these peacekeeping operations, where we're spending $250 million a year of U.S. taxpayer money, more than $1 billion a year for each one of these. If the media focused on this crisis, we'd be calling for no-fly zones and all sorts of action. The question that public policy makers have to ask themselves is what is good for the United States, because we cannot do everything. We have to do something. We can be a leader, but that doesn't automatically mean boots on the ground.
Right.
We can be a leader in other areas.
Rick, as always, we appreciate so much your insight.